here we have the Arkenstone here to discuss the situation with Israel and Palestine.
Hello,
Hey,
I am Kalan, or
mm-hmm.
Kalan Slayer, or Arkenstone. Any of those three of 17,000 names, but
17,000. Yeah. What did you think about my takes?
oh yeah. So yeah, that's a good place to start. So I think you were very fair. You did a very fair job of covering all the sides and issues. In my opinion, I didn't hear anything that was outlandish or something that I would take offense to necessarily.
It's not
I think
outlandish for me to say that the Palestinians have no right to their land because they declared war on Israel and they therefore forfeited the right to their land.
oh yeah. Okay.
I thought that would
Yeah.
be the
So
most controversial thing.
Uh, I think that is the most controversial thing. Still, I mean, arguing whether or not America should be involved is a different issue, but that's a different question. But as far as whether the Palestinians have right to their land since they declared war, it's a little complicated. Part of this is I know the background history
Mm.
somewhat of Israel and Palestine. Like the two-state system idea, I blame the British, who basically ruled Israel like a colony
Mm-hmm.
up until World War II, should be to blame for this because they're the ones that decided to split the country into two to begin with.
Right.
I think there was some favoritism toward the Arabs and Palestinians in the past when the European powers were giving independence to the countries in the region.
Mm-hmm.
But Israel obviously over the years has pretty much taken over all the territory that originally was allotted to the Palestinians.
Right. And if I remember correctly, because I did watch a video that did a very high level summary of the Wikipedia articles, basically. I know that sounds kind of lame. But what the articles basically said was it was the Arabs, the Palestinian Arabs, who were very upset with the proposed two-state solution. In response, they went and attacked Israel to take back some of that land. And it was Israel, through winning those wars, that they gained even more land than even the UN or the League of Nations wanted them to have. Is that accurate?
Uh, that is accurate. I haven't looked at. It's been a while since I've looked at the history, so I know that when Israel on Independence Day in 1948, when Israel first declared independence, they were immediately attacked from the onset. And they were actually able to take some land that was originally not given to them even then. The most famous war Israel's fought is the 6 Days War, where originally they were attacked by several different countries all at once. It's kind of a miracle in one sense.
Mm-hmm.
But not only did they take over the Gaza Strip in the West Bank, they also did take control of the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt for some time.
Oh, I didn't know that they conquered land from Egypt. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think they did that in the Bible days, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so Egypt, Syria, Jordan, the Palestinians, and I think Lebanon maybe at the time, all invaded at the same time.
And
then the war only lasted 6 days because Israel fought them all back and took the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. They also took the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt for a time. And then there's the Golan Heights, which is area that they claim from Syria as well.
Now, the Golan Heights, who does that belong to now? Does that belong to the Palestinians now?
So Golan Heights is not Palestinian. It's disputed territory between Israel and Syria. Israel kind of has control of it more firmly, partly because Syria has been in a civil war with itself for the past 10 plus years. So there's that. Now, the Sinai Peninsula was in Israel's hands, but then I think it was President Carter negotiated a famous peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, which normalized relations between the two. And Israel returned the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt at that point.
Interesting. And how long did that peace last?
Israel and Egypt have kind of been on neutral terms since then.
That's actually impressive.
Yeah, actually, so it's kind of impressive. Egypt was ruled by Sadat, someone at the time, and that guy actually got assassinated by terrorists because of his treaty with Israel.
Oh wow! So he laid down his life in support of Israel. That's impressive, actually.
Yeah, this was like late 1970s when this treaty, the Camp David Accords is what they're called.
Were those successful? I thought I heard someone say that they were unsuccessful.
Today, Egypt and Jordan and Israel are all on like neutral terms and whatnot.
Neutral terms, okay.
I don't think Egypt and Jordan bother Israel anymore because there really isn't a point for them. Now, obviously, there are other countries that don't like Israel still, like Iran, obviously.
Right.
Iran is Israel's number one enemy in the region. Hezbollah, which basically is Lebanon, ruling party for the most part.
Well, not just that, but Iran, I hear as well.
Yeah, Hezbollah is Iran supported, so obviously they don't like Israel. Now Hezbollah and Israel have been skirmishing a little bit. There's been a few skirmishes between the two in the past few weeks.
Yep, and I did cover how rumor has it that they're going to get involved.
Yeah, if they get involved, it could be this will escalate from so like here's the thing, is like Israel and Gaza have been at, and Hamas this is not their first war against each other. I don't remember what year it was, but it wasn't too long ago they actually fought another war.
Yeah, I frankly, that's a bit of history that it's not lost to me because I have access to Wikipedia, but I just don't know it.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out. It looks like there hasn't been like a big war. Yeah, there was a 7-week conflict between the two in 2017 because I believe some Hamas militants committed a terrorist attack and killed a few Israeli people.
Israelis, yeah.
Yeah, and the result was not on the scale that this attack was by any means. It was only a couple people that time.
Still bad.
The conflict ended up lasting 7 weeks, apparently. Also, Israel has done some things like, I think 2 years ago, they raided a mosque for militants and stuff at one point.
Yeah, and see, that's the tough thing. Like, all of these terrorist organizations, they basically do all their operations out of civilian areas where civilians live, and I guess in this case, even here where they worship too. So it's like people complain about Israel hurting civilians all the time. Well, the terrorists are living among the civilians.
Yeah,
it's not like they've built up their own military bases. I mean, I think they probably tried, but Israel has stomped them out, and frankly, rightfully so.
So if the Hamas had any military bases, they would have been destroyed already because Israel would have taken them out.
Right.
First. That's the problem that Israel has. Now, Hamas is notorious for hiding within civilians populations.
Right.
That's just the nature of it. Like, if you ever looked at a map of the Gaza Strip, it's not very big.
Yeah, the whole area is not particularly big.
No, like, I've heard some people say Israel's like the size of New Jersey or something, which...
Is it accurate?
I don't know how closely accurate that is, but it's not big. Like, Israel is not a very big area.
Yeah, it's pretty small. So, yeah. I guess the history notwithstanding, because you know my take, which is at this point the history doesn't really matter.
So basically, the history of this region, it's not as important for the current situation. Like, the thing is that these two countries or I shouldn't call Hamas a country necessarily, because they are a terrorist organization.
Right. It would be Palestine, right? It is technically the government of Palestine. The Palestinians did vote them in as like the rulers of the nation, right? It would be basically like the Democrats owning the majority of the House and the Senate and the presidency. So it's like, as the Democrats go, so goes the country.
Yeah. So basically, and Hamas was voted in 2008. In 2006. So they were voted in like almost 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They've entrenched themselves at this point into Palestinian government, which makes it harder to get rid of them because they actually have support.
Well, they're the official government. That's like if you were to call the Republicans a terrorist organization, and then they gained all the power in like all of the elected branches of the U.S. government. So then what do? The U.S. is essentially a terrorist nation if that happens, right? Right? And that puts you in a sticky situation. Because that has massive implications on what you could do to the nation writ large, which of course has massive implications on what can or will potentially be done to the citizens.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, you are right. Your take is right that the history is important for understanding how we got here. The history is irrelevant to explain what do we do now about this situation. Yeah, obviously history will tell us certain things that we could pay attention to and learn from. Like World War II is a great example because the Brits, like when the British and French were trying to appease Hitler before the war started, they originally tried to appease him just by letting him grab the territory he wanted.
This is how we got to where we are to a degree. Israel has been very, very light in their punishments of Hamas. They've had many opportunities to be like, you know what, we're going to go and stomp out Hamas. But instead, what do they say? We're going to mow the lawn. That's literally what they said. We're going to cut the grass. Yeah, they said that they are going to bomb, some of their weapons caches so that they're basically toothless, but they're not going to actually beat them. And this is where we got to where we are today. We have even people to this very day saying, be nicer to the terrorists. And then that's how you get them to back off when, hey, we've had decades of that strategy. And that's how we got to this exact moment. So no, maybe let's not do that. That whole concept gets me upset when people's first, like people's, and this may be graphic descriptions or whatever, but people's first reactions to seeing the fact that Hamas has like burned babies alive and beheaded them is to be like, oh man, shoot, we should have been nicer to them Hamas people. Like,
bro,
what kind of like psychotic brain damage do you have to have for that to be your first reaction?
Like, here's the thing is that, like, at the end of the day, Hamas is a terrorist organization. Their entire existence revolves around doing acts of terror, mostly against Israel in particular, because that's their target.
Right.
But they've also killed Americans, I'm assuming, too, in this conflict, that were in the line of fire.
Right.
So, Hamas, at the end of the day, is going to do atrocious acts of terror as a means of survival and as a means of spreading their propaganda. This is what Al-Qaeda does in targeting Americans. This is what Hezbollah has done against Israel. Like, this is even what the Taliban have done for 20 plus years while we were fighting them in Afghanistan. There comes a point where you stop trying to be nice to the bully and you just go in and take the bully out. This is what we did with the Nazis. Mm-hmm. This is what we did with Hitler. Eventually we got smart and realized Hitler's not going to stop. And so we teamed up, almost eradicated the Nazis. Now, you can't completely eradicate.
Yeah, no, we can't eradicate the Nazis when we're trying to build up space programs, so we hired a bunch of them. But that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole other thing. The most recent attempt we did at eradicating something was ISIS.
And we did a good job.
We did a good
Props to
job.
Obama,
Now,
not Obama, Trump, to be honest. Well, I think Obama actually helped with that, but
the invasion, the main invasion stuff happened in 2014 when Obama was president.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Trump took over, Trump finished what Obama started it, and then Trump amped it up and finished the job.
Right.
Now, yes, there are still ISIS terrorists out there because you can't completely 100% eradicate a group like that necessarily.
Yeah, but when was the last time you heard that ISIS did anything like?
Actually, I think I saw a headline this weekend that there was an attack in Brussels, in Belgium. I haven't actually looked at. I just saw the headline. I actually didn't look at the article, so I might be mistaken.
They lost the last bit of land that they owned in March of 2019.
They don't own any land. That's what I mean. Like, when I say they're not eradicated, I'm not saying they don't own any land. Like, they don't own any land. Unless they have a tiny pocket in Afghanistan or Syria.
Yeah.
Which is now, it's very, very possible that they might have some village in Syria because the country's been at civil war for 12 plus years now. And it's almost impossible to tell who owns what. For the most part, because rebels and the Syrians have been fighting each other. But at the same time, I mean, is that there are still probably members of ISIS floating around at different camps and stuff.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
But we did a good job of almost completely stamping them out.
Yeah, that also is true. And we have to give credit to the presidents who are kind of helming the ship in both of those scenarios, Donald Trump and Barack Obama. Moving forward, what would you like to see? Like, what do you think? What would be your ideal, and what would be like your realistic proposal for what should happen? My own ideal vision for what would happen is a two-state solution with Palestine next to Israel. That is not going to happen. I think that the Palestinians have never been in favor of a two-state solution as a majority for the most part, from what I understand. And Israel, I think this past weekend has given up on a two-state solution after seeing what Hamas has done. Now, there are probably some Palestinians who want to have a two-state solution, but I don't think there's enough of them for a two-state solution to actually work. But I think what's more realistic or likely in a positive, we got the good ending outcome would be for Israel to beat Hamas. And then I think slowly over the course of like 5 to 10 years, deport all the Palestinians out of Gaza and all the Palestinian lands, and then have full ownership of all of the lands in that area. I think someone put it this way, and I guess it's somewhat like tinged with ethno-state vibes, but the idea that was posited was, so the Jews have no ethno-state or no nation to call their own outside of Israel. But Palestinians, which are largely ethnic Arabs, there are plenty of other countries that they could go to where they could, live amongst other Arabs, such as like Iran, Egypt, Lebanon, like other places. So, it would make sense to at least allow one Jewish state to exist, and then allow the Palestinians to go to other places where more Arabs exist. And then there you're not doing any sort of genocide of like wiping people out or killing them or killing off like, a large portion of Jews that exist in the world, because they're allowed to exist and the Arabs are allowed to live in, not Arabia, I guess, but like other Arab nations. So that would be like my ideal thing. You can't deport them all immediately. And you also have to find time to make deals with other allies, like Egypt, for example, to send those Palestinians over into those other countries. But what type of endgame solution do you think would be like your favorite, or what are you hoping happens in the end?
Okay, so I have a few different perspectives here. The first perspective is the very, very much idealistic perfect case world scenario where the world is perfect and free of sin and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
In that scenario, Israel and Palestinians would live together in harmony under one government, potentially.
Ooh.
Kind of like how Democrats and Republicans live together.
In harmony.
We kind of live in harmony in the sense that we both, like Democrats and Republicans, somewhat have a fairly equal split of power.
Mm-hmm.
Now that can be argued, but
you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
You're not wrong. Like Democrats and think about it. We don't here in America. We're not treating a certain class of people as second-rate citizens.
I don't know. I mean, what about the FBI with targeting the Catholics and stuff?
I mean, we're not.
But
perfect.
I understand what you mean.
Well, what I mean is that on voting day, a person from Asia and a person from people who migrated from Thailand and people who have been in this country the whole time, they have equal rights at the voting plaza and on the bus and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think that's the ideal solution, is that equal representation and equal rights and stuff is the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, will Palestinians and Israelite and the Jews ever get along together peacefully in this world? They will not. It will probably never come to that point, because the Jews obviously have lived in the land for as long as history can tell.
Basically, yeah. I mean, didn't they take it over from the Canaanites? But other than that, yeah.
Yes, the Canaanites were pretty much all wiped out, though. There's not really a trace of their lineage left.
Right.
So, a lot of the Palestinian lineage comes from more when the Arabs invaded the Israelite lands and took them over from the Byzantines in the 600s AD. And then they settled down in the lands and basically for 1,400 years ruled them more or less between Arabs, the Turks. We're not counting the Crusaders, because the Crusaders were just as bad as the Arabs in treating the Jews. Even though they were supposedly Christian.
I thought they were Catholic, not Christian.
Catholic. Yeah.
An important distinction.
A very important distinction. And I would love to have a discussion on how much of Catholicism is Christian and whatnot. That's a different topic. With a whole
spoiler alert.
Message.
Spoiler alert, it's less than 100.
Less than 100%? But we can't say 0%. There are some similarities. But, yeah. Anyway, the thing is, though, is that the Jews and Arabs, they'll never get along with each other completely peacefully.
Right.
Now, and another ideal solution is that they won't live with each other completely peacefully, but if the two governments were at least united to one with fair amount of representation for both, then I think the country might have a chance to stabilize.
Here's one thing I want to push back on you on with that, though, is if you do that, how do you deal with radical factions within the Palestinian people that hate the Jews and want to see Israel destroyed as a state that exists? Because that's the main reason I want deportation, not a two-state solution. Because if you have a two-state solution, get rid of Hamas, there's so many Palestinians who are probably already radicalized that they would just create a new Hamas and then go and try to kill more Jews again.
Yeah, that's why I've been talking idealistically. I haven't been realistic yet. Here's my realistic thing.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, the two-state solution, we've seen it in action for upwards of 50 plus years, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to when Israel was first made independent. That solution has obviously not worked out.
Right.
And history does tell us that when you try to divide a country into multiple nations, messy things can happen. This happened with India when India was granted independence. Like when India and Pakistan split off and became independent countries, you had large portions of Hindus suddenly stuck in Muslim majority regions, and large portions of Muslims suddenly stuck in Hindu controlled regions. And you had massive migrations back and forth between the two. And there was also a lot of violence and conflict originally. Fortunately, those countries have stabilized, but there's still tension.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's the problem is if you put these people together who don't like each other, like right next to each other, like there's always going to be that tension, which is why I think they need to be separated through deportation.
Yeah. So here's my realistic thing that I think should happen. One, Hamas needs to be eliminated.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, let's be honest. Hezbollah, Hamas, the terrorist organizations that have been terrorizing Israel, they need to be wiped out decisively. Because we've incrementally trying to fix the situation has also failed.
Right.
And it doesn't work. Like, could say the same thing about Republicans trying to incrementally change the government too here. It just hasn't succeeded.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you give concessions to your enemy, to the person you're trying to fight, you end up weakening yourself in the process. And you both end up losing in the long run.
Right. Now, this doesn't mean that compromise is bad, but it's hard to compromise with someone who wants you to be dead. You know?
Yeah. Like, I mean, obviously, Republicans and Democrats, at the end of the day, compromising between the two is not the worst strategy because it helps stabilize our country and whatnot. But in the terms of Israel and Hamas, there's no compromise left. Hamas wants Israel eliminated, and Israel would honestly probably love to wipe Hamas out.
Right.
At this point, too. Especially after the terrorist acts that Hamas has committed these past few weeks. So that's the first thing, is they should just ignore the... I think also part of the reason Israel hasn't fully executed is because they have a lot of international pressure not to.
Right. But I think that with this terrorist attack, they have less international pressure not to now. Because you can't really blame Israel for wanting to go scorched earth on people who did this.
Yeah. I think at this point they should ignore the people who are telling them to stop and just get the job done.
What if getting the job done by their standards involves further violations of the rules of war, and violations of the Geneva Convention, which, to their credit, it seems like they're walking back things like the siege. But like, there are some people over here, they're like Lindsey Graham, right, saying like, do whatever you need to do, level the place. Like, okay. would you be on board with like them just like absolutely flattening Gaza and blowing up everyone who lives there?
So I would not. So here's the thing. This is
that's not a no. Part. Wait a second. Wait.
No, hold on. This is the tricky part about war, and so I would love to see minimum civilian casualties too. I think at this point, the Ukraine war has gotten to a point where civilian casualties have been minimalized for the most part.
I guess I would need to do more research.
Maybe. I mean, at that point, right now they're just fighting on the front lines. There's not like a huge amount. You don't hear a lot about bombing raids and stuff, but that's beside the point.
I thought that civilian buildings in Ukraine are being routinely bombed. Is that not the case?
Oh, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe Russia is still attacking whatever they can, but I would agree with your take that a ground assault into the city is probably the best route to go to get rid of Hamas, because Hamas will use civilians as a human shield.
Right.
And unfortunately, when you have a nation that is willing to put their civilians in harm's way as a means of survival, there will be more casualties on the civilian side.
Mm-hmm. I think it's probably the
Now,
reason why there are actually more casualties from Palestinians in this war than casualties from Israelis.
yeah. Also, yeah. So Israel's kind of stuck in the situation where they need to wipe Hamas out. Like, the militants need to be captured and wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not agree to Israel just completely carpet bombing Gaza City. Completely.
Yeah, me either. That'd be awful.
Yeah.
Like I'm pro life. The reason I laugh at that concept is just that it's so preposterous to me. He's like, oh, we should just like throw. That'd be like to me if someone said like, hey, you know what America should do? We should drop a nuke on Gaza. Like, I don't laugh because I think it's cute to kill civilians. I laugh because it's one of the most ridiculous like proposals that I've seen. You're talking about as an ally of Israel dropping a nuke on a tiny little city that is like basically within Israel.
Yeah, they would. A nuke wouldn't do any. Like, nuking. There's a reason why no one has used the nuke since Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Mm-hmm.
Doing so completely escalates the chance of a World War III breaking out.
Well, no, it's not about that. It's about the fallout from the nuclear stuff.
Oh, the nuclear fallout.
I'm like, you can't be an ally of Israel and then drop a nuke next to Israel. Like,
yeah, you can't just do that.
Yeah.
The fallout from that alone will damage Israel farms and villages as well, because Gaza's not that far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, if Israel and Palestine cannot get along, then it is easier to move Palestine out of Israel than it is to tell Israel that they can't have land.
Yeah.
Which is a preposterous thing to say.
Yeah, I mean, because the only other Jewish states that exist other than Israel are New York and New Jersey.
Is that supposed to be a joke or something?
It is. There are tons of Jews who live in New York.
Yeah,
That's like basically where all the Jews who aren't in Israel are.
Yeah, that would be true considering that they were almost wiped out of Europe 70, 80 years ago, unfortunately. Because they used to all live in Europe. And then World War II drove them all out of Europe into Israel or to America. But yeah, I think... Now, I wouldn't say that forcibly deporting people from Palestine is the greatest and easiest solution. Now, some people...
What do you do? Do you ask them nicely? Like...
I mean...
Because the Palestinians who are already there, they want more land. They don't want to leave. So how would you get them to leave voluntarily?
So there might be some people... So there are probably a small percentage of the population who actually would like to leave because they're tired of fighting and just want a more peaceful, established life. So there are probably a small percentage of people who would just happily take up the chance to leave and go to Jordan or Egypt or somewhere safe. Now, you're right that a lot of Palestinians won't want to leave. The first step is to give people the option to leave,
right?
If they want to. And if people take that option, then that's great. There doesn't need to be any further problems. But if people decide they don't want to leave, then deportation is an option at that point. The only reason I'm hesitant is that you don't, like, deporting an entire population or ethnicity of people from one place isn't exactly like, it's hard because, like, in America, we grow up being taught racism is wrong and stuff, and
I'm not proposing a racist policy. Look, it's a question of is having people living in your nation who hate you worth the terrorism that they brew? That's the question to me. And if I was the president of Israel or whatever they call themselves, prime ministers or whatever, kings and queens, I would say the answer is certainly no.
That is fair. That is fair. That is something to keep in mind, is that, like, I guess that's something I forget about, is that the Palestinians do have a history of sprouting terrorism from amongst their people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's because Islam in general is a religion that promotes activity of that kind.
So some would disagree with you. I think they would say that that's in dispute. I think it's 50-50 on how different people interpret Islamic texts. But there clearly is enough there that, yes, that there's something that justifies violence to a degree. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the violent sex.
Obviously, a lot of, like, a whole bunch of Muslims in the world, the vast majority of them actually don't really want violence.
Yeah.
Per se. They just want to live their lives like any other people. There's only the more radical people that decide that violence is the key to achieving their goals.
Yeah, that's true. And hopefully, for the sake of even the Palestinian Muslims living there, this war ends quickly and soon. But thanks, Colin Slayer, for hopping onto the stream to talk about the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.